Welcome to Ethics of Care. And I brought a little helper today. This is Freedom. And she came to help bring out my more feminine, nurturing side. So I hope this helps you understand this theory. Thank you, Freedom. Okay. Ethics of Care. This is Moral Orientation and Moral Development by Gilligan. And my first thoughts about this theory, when I first used Timmons' Conduct and Character in my graduate studies in philosophy, this was not included in the selection. I mean, we had things like egoism with Plato, we had Aristotle, we had Kant, we had John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, and we had Thomas Aquinas. We have these sorts of theories going on. And when I saw Ethics of Care added into one of the later editions, my first reaction was, oh brother, feminism has finally arrived in the hallowed halls of ethics. And I just want to say up front, I have completely changed my mind after reading Carol Gilligan's article. And if you ever happen to see this Carol Gilligan, I just want to let you know I appreciate your work, and especially your work in ethics and moral theory. And after reading your article, I had a complete change of heart. Also, I recently saw a response, a YouTube video response you made, Carol, to James Dobson apparently misquoting you or taking a quote out of context for something he was trying to arrange. And so I will do my best to present your views on ethics and morality and gender issues accurately and fairly, and then I'll make a very concrete division where I get into my own opinions or applications as opposed to what you're presenting. So we're going to start with my best effort of distilling to you what Carol Gilligan had to say about ethics and morality and care. Okay, in the beginning of this article of moral orientation and moral development, Carol Gilligan makes this distinction. The justice perspective finds articulation in the moral theories of Aquinas, Mill, and Kant, in which morality is conceived to be a matter of autonomous individuals settling conflicting claims against standards of equal and impartial respect. That's okay. Just keep sticking with me. By contrast, the care perspective conceives morality to be a matter of creating and maintaining relationships in which agents respond to the perceived needs of others. And isn't that so much nicer? Okay, just do your best. Try to get some over here when you can. Okay, so Carol starts this article talking about perspective. And if you ever saw that rabbit-duck picture, where depending on how you're looking at it, it may first appear to you as a rabbit, and then later, if you keep gazing at it, it may begin to appear as a duck. And it's not that one view is superior to the other, it's just two different ways of looking at the same thing. And we tend to default into one image rather than the other. Even though we can see both perspectives, we can shift our perspective and look back and forth, we tend to default to one sort of thing. And in many ways, this is how she's going to portray the difference between a justice type thinking and a care type thinking. I would even go so far as to perhaps say a masculine type thinking versus a feminine type thinking. And we'll talk about these distinctions later, especially my own personal application of this theory. When we look at an analysis of the language and logic of men and women's moral reasoning about a range of hypothetical and real dilemmas, underlines the distinction elaborated in this paper between a justice and a care perspective. The empirical association of care reasoning with women suggests that discrepancies observed between moral theory and moral judgments of girls and women may reflect a shift in perspective, a change in moral orientation. Like the figure ground shift in ambiguous figure perception, justice and care as moral perspectives are not opposites or mirror images of one another, with justice being uncaring and care being unjust, Instead, these perspectives denote different ways of organizing the basic elements of moral judgments: self, others, and the relationship between them. With the shift in perspective from justice to care, the organizing dimension of relationships changes from inequality/equality to attachment/detachment, reorganizing thoughts, feelings, and language so that words connotating relationship like dependence or responsibility, or even moral terms such as fairness and care, take on different meanings. To organize relationships in terms of attachment, don't you just keep trying, sweetie pie. Don't let it get you down. See, it's not the activity that matters, it's the relationship involved and the nurturing and the sense of care, not how good or bad a job we did. If you give them a little bit longer stems like this, they might stick in better and go in from the top and then push them down. But if you get longer stems,
these ones are falling off.
yeah, if you get longer stems, so go in. So try to get the stems like this long, and then you can probably get them to stick in Uncle's beard a little better. Yeah, about right about like this. There you go. All right. Anyways, back to what Carol is saying. She's not saying these are antinomies or opposites or contradictions, where on the one side we have justice and the other side we have care. But both things are present and we can look at both. and it doesn't mean justice is better or care is a superior way of looking at things. They're just different ways of looking at the same thing. Just try new one. It's just different ways of looking at the same thing. And if you can look at things from a multiplicity of perspectives, which, by the way, is a more feminine way of looking at things, rather than from a masculine singularity of purpose or perspective, it will give you a broader range of how to deal with moral issues and theories. So from a justice perspective, the self as moral agent stands as the figure against a ground of social relationships, judging the conflicting claims of self and others against a standard of equality or equal respect. In other words, the categorical imperative, the golden rule, etc. From a care perspective, the relationship becomes the figure defining itself and others within the context of relationship. The self as a moral agent perceives and responds to the perception of need. The shift in moral perspective is manifest by a change in the moral question from what is just to how to respond. And what a great question. I mean, we may be able to tell through logic or analytical reasoning, almost like doing math. I mean, what is just, what is unjust, what's fair, what's unfair, what's equitable, what's taking advantage of someone. But with an ethics of care motif, it's asking, okay, we see this, we see an injustice being done here, but how should we respond to it? How do we deal with the injured party? How can we maintain relationship? How can we build relationship? How can, instead of just dealing with this one instance, how can we work on maybe the causes that brought this thing about? So instead of just looking at a community or a specific issue, we're looking at relationships. We're looking more at what brought these things about. At least I know in Native American traditions, when someone committed a crime or a young person was unruly, the tribe took like a collective moral responsibility. It's like, what were we doing as a group or a tribe that produced this sort of individual? And I think that would be a great question for our society to ask as well. It's like, what have we done as a society to produce so many people in our criminal justice system? We need to share in that responsibility. It's not just like these are bad seeds and they acted out. And I don't think Carol Gilligan is saying we shouldn't take away personal responsibility for actions, but there's also a collective responsibility when we look at crimes committed in a society or things that we may consider immoral or unethical behaviors.